Hello, everyone. I'm Brendan Marcello, joined alongside Michael Niziolek. This is the Auburn Undercover Podcast, presented by WeHaveDonuts.com, D-O-U-G-H, nuts.com, located in Birmingham. Check out the coffee shops in Birmingham. Go to WeHaveDonuts.com for more information on where you can find these beautiful and delicious donuts, which are also being served at Prevail Union coffee shops in Montgomery and Auburn. And there are some new pop-up locations. Go to WeHaveDonuts.com for much more information. The official donut of the Auburn Undercover Podcast. Michael, Auburn basketball coming off a split week in which it lost to Texas A&M in 81-80 loss, one in which they trailed by 17 points without their best player, Bryce Brown, on the court. And, of course, you thought Auburn would be out of luck at that point, but they came storming back, had a chance to win it. Actually, were up at one point late in the game after being down 17, but lost 81-80. A&M went on to beat Kentucky by double digits at home, and A&M's in the top 25 once again in the AP poll as a result. Then Auburn went to Georgia, won by 17 points. Georgia's really just depleted and down at this point. I wonder if Mark Fox has longed for this college basketball earth. But we'll see. Auburn fell 2 spots in the AP poll, and they're out of the top 10 in the coaches poll. A lot of losses among the top 10 teams, and for that fact, the top 25 last week. Were you surprised Auburn dropped 2 spots, or is that about right? Or because some teams actually moved up.
Yeah, the top 3 teams all suffered at least 1 loss. But the 3 teams behind them last week all suffered 1 loss. So it was interesting that Auburn fell down a little, especially in the AP poll. They've been behind in the coaches poll kind of from the start, from their spot in the AP poll. But it doesn't really matter since the bracket preview, they were the first 2 seed at number 5 after both those games.
Yeah, that's something. It's quite this disparity between what the selection committee's thinking, heck, what even the RPI kind of has Auburn at, and a lot of these power index polls compared to the human voters. I do wonder, and I hate pulling this card, but I do wonder if it's just name brand with Auburn.
Yeah.
If it's just not a lot of people are watching Auburn on TV because, well, in fact, I mean, Auburn hasn't been on, ESPN or ESPN2 much other than, guess what? The Texas A&M game, and they lost that game. They've been on SEC Network a lot, of course, but, not a lot of people nationally outside the SEC are tuning into the SEC Network. So a lot of these voters, they look at scores and don't do anything beyond that. They're not really watching games.
And it might be about the SEC. I know all the coaches in the SEC are convinced that it's the best thing, ever, but you kind of look at some of the records and maybe some of the kind of who's beating up on who, and you don't necessarily think so. With Kentucky down, you just kind of figure from a national perspective, a conference is down. And I know Bruce Pearl and I know most of the coaches would disagree with that, but there's a hard sell, I think, nationally that this conference, they were talking about 8 teams at one point, and there's just no way right now. So that could probably contribute to it a little bit.
Yeah, but you could also say it's easy to look and see that the top 4 teams have separated themselves in the SEC with Auburn, Tennessee, Florida, and then one could argue between Missouri and Alabama, and then maybe Kentucky in there as well. Kentucky's had a tough stretch here lately. They've lost 3 straight games for the first time in the Calipari era. And Auburn, of course, hosts Kentucky on Valentine's night, this Wednesday. That's going to be a very interesting game. We'll talk more about that here in a minute. But I would argue that, Auburn owns wins against, other than himself, of course, but 2 of the next 3 teams below them in the standings in the SEC. Both on the road, by the way, and by double digits, at Tennessee and at Missouri. Auburn's yet to go to Florida, but that's coming. And that'll be an interesting game. And then, of course, Alabama, that's one of Auburn's 2 losses. That game was on the road. Interestingly, Crimson Tide did not have Colin Sexton on the floor, but they won anyway. But here's Auburn at the top of the SEC standings, up by 2 games with 6 games remaining, 3 weeks in the regular season remaining. And this Kentucky game, again, go back to name brand value, seems to be the biggest game of the year at home for Auburn, outside maybe the Alabama game coming up. But that just always happens when Kentucky comes to town.
Well, yeah, and it's a Kentucky team that's ironically lost 3 games in a row. It's the first time in the John Calipari they've lost 3 games in a row. Pretty impressive that they've avoided that thus far. So they're going to be a team looking to avoid a 4-game losing streak and really almost falling out of the NCAA tournament picture. They've fallen out completely out of the rankings, and they need a win pretty desperately here. They did not look good against Texas A&M, who could be the hottest team in the conference when it's all said and done by the end of the season. But yeah, Kentucky needs a win here too.
Yeah, and they're a team that they don't make a lot of threes. They get cold during some big stretches, and they also look tired sometimes when they're on the court. Watching that A&M game, they were just getting run out of the gym in the second half. They were not making hustle plays. When shots were not being made, they kind of slowed things down. It's interesting. Their best 3-point shooter, for example, is Quade Green, 37.5%, 9.8 points a game, right? And then Kevin Knox is your leading scorer at 15 points. He's also averaging 5.6 rebounds. My guess would be, and you talked to Bruce Pearl on Monday, of course, but Kentucky's a team that size is going to be an issue again for Auburn, and that's something that obviously popped up against Texas A&M and is really the big reason why A&M won that game. So I'm sure there's some concern there going into this one.
Yeah, there is, and Kentucky, look, I mean, their record doesn't show it, but I mean, they're always going to be one of the most talented teams in the country. I mean, they have talent to beat anybody on any night. And so, they're 17-8 and 6-6. But at the same time, I mean,
just look at the trip they made to West Virginia a week or 2 ago.
Yeah.
And they won that game.
So, they're always capable of not only winning the game, but winning big. And so you can't take them lightly. And, maybe Kentucky comes in. Last time they were here, they lost. They're going to be a motivated bunch and play with some fire. It'll be interesting to kind of see, especially how that game starts. Auburn's really, in a lot of these SEC games, with a few exceptions, kind of led from start to finish. And with their 3-point shooting, it's hard for teams to kind of catch up, especially with Kentucky that doesn't shoot the 3 ball well. I don't think they can afford to kind of get down quickly.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to watch for a lot of reasons. Speaking of which, former Auburn basketball coach Tony Barbee will be back in town, supposedly. Now, what was it? 2 years ago they came back to Auburn. Kentucky did with was supposed to with Tony Barbee, but he wasn't there. He was recruiting. Was the explanation that was provided. I thought it was complete horse hockey. But
assistant coach doesn't usually do that during the season.
Well, the Kentucky beat writers were trying to sell it to me like, well, no, that's legit. Like, oh, okay. I know a lot of head coaches in the SEC that go, hey, we're playing an SEC road game in the middle of the week. Why don't you just go ahead and hit the road, go recruiting?
Take some time.
Take some time to travel. Now, I know Tony Barbee loves to travel. I mean, he used Auburn money to go to Australia to recruit once. So, why not? Why not go travel in the middle of the season?
Well, and what you're getting at is Bruce Pearl told Auburn fans today, he was asked about him possibly being in the game, and told fans to be classy, said he might even talk to the Auburn Jungle, which is the fan section, and the leadership, and tell them that he wants them to be appropriate, which I'm always, telling the students to do that. That's always not a good sign. But you were around for that part of that era. Do fans have a legitimate beef with Tony, or is this more just sour grapes that, former coach playing, coaching for Kentucky? Give us some insight into the Tony's finish here and kind of the way things were left.
Tony did not handle his tenure here at Auburn very well. Not very friendly with fans, the media, boosters. always made excuses, threw some players under the bus on several occasions, even when they were injured. Never really showed quite an embrace of the Auburn job and what he was given. He was very unorganized based off what I saw firsthand in the year I saw him. There would be days where there would be practices in which the players would show up at a certain time they were told, and then no one was there. And they'd be like, when's practice? They don't know. I don't know of anyone else who's ever run a Division I basketball program like that. Tony likes to golf. He was a horrible hire. I'll say that right now. And I mean, Bruce could say what he wants, and listen, he's going to say that and be classy, but Auburn fans can do whatever the hell they want. And if they want to boo the guy, he probably deserves it. Because,
what I'm getting at, there's some legitimate acrimony from the Auburn side with the fans. It's hard when you're not there for a 10-year. Yeah, you don't get that sense, and so
they don't not like him because he lost games. There's more to it.
That's what I'm getting at. There's more to it than that. That's what I was asking, and that's legitimate. I mean, look, you're part of and what Bruce does so well is it's a salesman job. Basically, you're selling a product, and you're trying to get the fans to buy in. And gosh, he hasn't won very much prior to this season. I mean, he's won a little bit, but no tournament appearances, and but he sold himself to the Auburn faithful, and they've really bought into him. And so, yes. Obviously, very stark contrast from what came before.
Very, very different. I mean, Tony thought he was coaching at Kentucky, is the way he kind of treated it. But but he almost seemed like he was above the fray, like he thought he was too good for Auburn. Was kind of the gist you got from him. And then from a media standpoint, listen, media doesn't really matter, but I recall a time, I was not there at the game, but I was fed this by another reporter who I worked with at the time. There was a road game. Tony didn't want to talk because he, quote, and here's a very general and common theme in his life, he had to get on a plane and go recruit. So he didn't have time to talk after the game. He was in Starkville, Mississippi.
So he just didn't like kind of the key part of the job.
Yeah, facing the music and being accountable, earning your paycheck was one of them.
Because even if you're not accountable to the media, if you're accountable to the fans, then you could do that.
Oh, hell no. Tony was bad. He listen, I mean, during his final season or whatever, they spent all kinds of money for their Midnight Madness event or whatever.
Well, didn't they spend for 2 years straight, like the most in recruiting too?
Yes.
And
they were like top 15 in the nation in spending for recruiting, and boy, did that
ended up with like a mishmash of garbage. Not to be insulting, but I mean just the results for spending. They didn't end up landing anybody.
Well, that and they would get players that would get in trouble and have to leave, or just never panned out, or they would transfer. It was disgusting. It was. Yeah. Tony Barbee took a job, treated it like it was Kentucky, but acted like he was above it all, and spent all this kind of money that Auburn probably should not have been spending on recruiting, and also, as I was mentioning, the Midnight Madness thing where they brought in, I think Ludacris, if I recall, and then they brought in some comedian,
that's
right?
Pretty cool.
They spent a lot of money, and Auburn would never released how much money they
spent. You didn't get the waiver that Ludacris had. That would have been. We should FOIA that now and see if they'll
give it to us. Yeah. They spent a lot of money on it. I mean, they gave Tony all the money in the world to do whatever he wants. So at the end of that last season, they could fire him for good, and he just never did anything. Now, the one moment he showed humility and realized something was wrong with his communication skills and the way he was handling the job was 45 minutes before he was fired. When he was speaking to the media, talking about how this is why I believe we're going to get it going next season. I know I've made some mistakes, blah, blah, blah. One time he did not run away from questions. In fact, he stood in the hallway there and just kept taking questions. And even after everybody was done, kind of just stood there like going, anybody else got anything else? Anybody else want to ask a question? Whereas the 3-4 weeks leading into that, when all the questions were, you feel like your job's on the line here, or how do you feel about your job security? As soon as those questions would come up, he'd walk away. He'd leave the press conference or he'd leave the practice court to get away from the media. And it got to a point where we started asking it as the very last question so we'd be able to get other things. And I started keeping a tally of which way he would exit, left or right. And I can't remember which, but he exited one way every time except for once. He went the other way. But anyway, he just became like a joke. He was a running joke at Auburn during the final month of his tenure here. Never got it going. Was never going to get it going, in my opinion. And Bruce Pearl's exactly what they needed. They needed a salesman, as you said. And anyway, so I say that to say this. If people are booing, if Tony Barbee is at the game, if people are booing, I don't blame them, because he really kind of put this program through the ringer those last couple of years on the Plains.
Do you think he shows up?
He should. I mean, I'm guessing he will.
If he wants a big consideration, you got to stand up, and you can't duck it for 2 years like that. You can't do that.
Yeah, I mean, if he did that, that would be just completely. Well, it would. I don't know. Whatever. I like to give guys the benefit of the doubt until they prove me wrong, and boy, did that guy prove me wrong a lot.
Yeah.
He was just. I had no idea why he was the coach at an SEC program. Did well at UTEP, but man, that guy should never coach a big program again. If he, unless he's a changed man, he's changed his approach with things.
Yeah,
I don't see how, because he was arrogant to a point. Even with his coaching, he would leave guys in too long to give them a message. He would yank guys without any explanation, and then the team would go cold. Even when this player would be hot, shooting the ball, he would just yank him. I'm telling you, Mike, I could not explain what he would do on game days. Now, I'm not a coach. I mean, nowhere near it. I don't have the knowledge to coach a basketball team. But the things he did were, like, as a casual fan sitting there, irked everybody. Because it was like, what are you doing? That guy has only played, 9 minutes. And he's up to 12 points. And you just yanked him out of the game? Strange. Just strange. But anyway, he holds a piece of paper now on the bench for Kentucky with his old coach and the man who pretty much gave him every job in his life.
Yeah, because he was with them at Memphis before that. If people as an assistant,
Yep. And now he's at Kentucky. That's why whenever I'm going on a tangent here, Kenny Payne, who's also an assistant at Kentucky, and Tony Barbee, Cal always pushes those guys to be head coaches in the media about once a year. I think the last coach he did it this year was Kenny Payne, and they keep not getting hired. I remember when Mississippi State came open before they hired. Gosh, I'm already forgetting his name. He was only there for like 3 years before Ben Howland was there. Anyway, Kenny Payne's name kept getting pushed and pushed and pushed, and they interviewed him, and while they were interviewing him at the Final Four in New Orleans, I believe, I got a source telling me Kenny Payne is interviewing with Mississippi State right now. And so I had something up, tweeted something that he is interviewing right now. And as soon as that happened, let's just say he was out of contention the moment they walked out that meeting room. Because they knew that guy was just loved getting his name out there. But anyway.
that was a tangent.
Yeah, it's just Cal's guys are interesting. Name a Calipari coach who's been successful.
Yeah,
you can't find one. I think Cal's an underrated coach. Now, the guys he has under him, for whatever reason, they just don't pan out. They just don't.
Well, because you can't replicate what he does to be successful either.
Well, getting number one recruiting classes every year?
Yeah, that's not easy.
No, it's not. But I also think Cal is a good coach. I don't think it's just recruiting. I do think he's a good coach.
No, but I'm saying if even if he replicated his style of coaching,
yeah,
it's hard to replicate his success just because of his unique ability to bring in those classes.
Right. So all that to say this, fans, do what you want. I know Bruce Pearl wants to keep it classy because Bruce Pearl's.
So you're saying UBU. You don't listen to Bruce Pearl.
No,
so
I mean,
you got to do what you got to do. I get it.
Yeah.
I like it.
All right. I'll say this: you were here. Bruce Pearl was not when that all happens.
Right. That's true.
Bruce Pearl does not know what it was like. And listen, I don't know what it was like because one, I'm not a fan, but two, I was only here for like a year of it.
Yeah.
I didn't go through all the years.
Right.
And they had some bad years.
I appreciate that. I think that's a fair message. It's a counterpoint. It's not throwing Pearl under the bus.
Yeah, Pearl. Listen, Pearl's like the
I
consummate
get what
professional when it comes to.
I get what he's saying. It's like I don't disagree.
Well, and he also wants to focus on the game and his players.
Right, but at the same time, it wouldn't be like he's coming for a third time and you're still booing. Then you kind of got to give it up.
Right, but this will be the first time.
If he's dodged it before too, that shows that there's some acrimony on his side at least, or some. Well, just sour grape.
He allegedly was recruiting.
Allegedly ditched out on it the first time.
I do hope he shows up just so maybe someone can ask him what his handicap is now on the golf course.
Just take a walk away to the left or right?
The right. I think the right is what he usually did. But it wasn't right. It was stage right. So actually to the left. I always do stage right and stage left.
Well,
because his career was about to exit stage left.
Fans can be on the lookout for that.
Yeah, but he will get booed. He's not going to get applauded.
And when you tell fans not to boo, the first reaction, I mean, that just guarantees it.
Well, listen, some of the students will probably adhere to that, but the fans in the crowd that aren't students, they're the ones paying the money.
It'll be interesting to see if there's any signs.
Well, there was 2 years ago.
Yeah, I saw some pictures.
I'm sure there will be maybe some this year, but we'll see. I mean, if the leadership of the jungle listens to Bruce and then like they take it upon themselves to ask any students who bring signs, hey, let's throw those away. We're not going to do that. Maybe so, but the non-students, they'll boo the moment they see that guy. It's going to happen. I mean, it just is.
That's what I figured, but
anyway, this is a huge game for Auburn. Just because you don't want to lose to a 500 team in the SEC. You don't want to lose any ground in the SEC race. Auburn is obviously a legitimate threat to win the SEC title. I mean, they've been on top of the standings here for what? How many days have been on top of the standings now? I guess since the beginning, technically. Yeah,
they were tied for the first 4 games, and then
so even when they lost the one game,
they still first.
So they've been on top since the beginning of the SEC season. That is something. And ESPN BPI, the Basketball Power Index, gives them about a 92% chance of winning the regular season title. There's some tough games coming up, and Kentucky's one of them. We said last week was the same thing with A&M coming to Auburn, and this Kentucky game, a lot like A&M, has me worried a little bit for Auburn's streak here. Now, when it comes to Bryce Brown, injured shoulders in the A&M game. If you had to say right now he'd play, is he going to play in the Kentucky game?
No, he's playing.
Yeah. Do you think he'll be affected in any playing defense?
Maybe there's a play or two where he doesn't. If there's like a chance where he could take a charge, maybe he doesn't take that charge. But
because he's an incredible on-the-ball defender.
He looked fine. I mean, they weren't going full speed today. They were doing a lot of scout team stuff, and he didn't have any contact, obviously. But unless there's a setback tomorrow, I wouldn't imagine. He was shooting with no problems. And that's the Georgia game. They say he was really hurt. And we'll take him at their face value, but he didn't need to play that game.
Well, some of our posters at Auburn Undercover on the Body Get a Message board said that they were there and they could see him grimacing a little bit late during shoot around Saturday.
Yeah. But there was no reason to risk it. It wasn't a game that I don't think he needed to play. So this is a game that they want him to play, and he's had we'll have 4 days in between. So swelling goes down, feels better. That they got a good training staff, so I think he'll be good to go.
Think he starts?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
That's my take on it. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So beyond this Kentucky game, Auburn's obviously got 6 games remaining, including Kentucky. They go on the road to South Carolina Saturday. Then they host Alabama, a huge game a week from Wednesday. And then it's back-to-back road games, Florida against Arkansas, and then they close the season at home March 3rd against South Carolina. Auburn, of course, this past week in the NCAA Selection Committee gives us a little peek at their thought process going into really the final month of the season. And Auburn was the top number 2 seed in their top 16 bracket, so to speak. Auburn, the top number 2 seed, and ranked them 5th overall, which, as we said previously in the program, higher than the polls, the human polls, and even some of the RPI. Obviously, they see something with Auburn there, and they're rewarding them for what they've done so far. My question to you, Mike, is Auburn's a number 2 seed right now. Practically everybody's got it like that in their brackets right now. These 6 games remaining, if they go through it unscathed, I think Auburn's a 2 seed, obviously, even no matter what happens in the SEC tournament. Now, what if they lose a couple? What does Auburn have to do here to stay in the top 4 seed line? Because those are more favorable matchups, obviously. When you get down to 5 and below, that's when things start getting dicey in first-round games. But 4 seed and above, in my opinion, is what Auburn wants to get. What do they have to do down the stretch here to make sure they maintain that seed line?
You'd think if they go 4-2 and win a game in the SEC tournament, they'll be at least a 4, probably a 3 or better. If they were to go 3-3 and lose in their first game, which would be the second round, obviously they've clinched a bye already.
Right.
Maybe you're talking 4 or 5, but it would probably depend on what everybody else does too. Because there are important games here. I mean, you lose to Florida, Alabama, and Kentucky. I mean, your resume is okay, and you're going to have a lot of wins, but I mean, you've lost most of your notable games at that point in the conference.
And also the committee, I don't know if it's technically an official thing they do anymore, but they pay attention to how teams finish. They still do. And Auburn's biggest games are those games you just mentioned. And if you lose those games, all 3 of them, so to speak, that's when you start questioning the resume a little bit as far as maybe being a 3 seed or 2 seed.
Yeah, and then you'll have gone 4-4 in your last 8 games too, because you count those last 2, the last week. So
A&M, yeah.
Texas A&M, that was a team that's finally healthy and playing well. So, but I mean, they're in a good place to not have to play very well and still be a top 3 seed.
Yeah, Auburn's best win so far this season, if you look at KenPom, is at Tennessee. That was way back on January 2nd to open the SEC season. A 10-point win. Tennessee right now is number 11 according to KenPom. And I go by KenPom a lot, guys, just because they do an incredible job with offensive and defensive efficiency and keeping track of players and all that stuff. Interestingly, Texas A&M is 21. Auburn lost to them, of course. Outside of Tennessee, between Tennessee and today, their next best win was against Missouri on the road, and they're 37th. So that's where you start factoring in where is the marquee wins.
Missouri doesn't have their best player either playing this season. So
right. So where's that biggest win? And now you go into a stretch here where against Kentucky, they're number 33 despite losing 3 straight games. Alabama's 43, Florida's 26, Arkansas's 45. So you're talking about a lot of top 50 opponents that Auburn hasn't had to quite face during a big stretch here. I mean, if you look at one point after the Tennessee game, the next 3 teams that they faced were 45, 88, 58. Then there was a stretch 81, 37, 61, 88, 87, and then they lost to 21 Texas A&M and won at 81 Georgia. This stretch coming up is the toughest of the season.
Yeah,
it really is.
There's no question. I mean, they're going to be judged by that, and they could. It's hard to picture them dropping to a 5 just because of what they've done and what their record will be. They're not going to probably lose those 2 games to South Carolina. So even 2-4, and then you win one in the tournament, you still. I mean, they're going to be up there, but at the same time, it'll be interesting to see. What the committee's obviously thinking differently than the polls too. So how does the committee look at it? We'll have to wait and see.
Well, I also think that with Auburn being number 5 where they're at now, that gives them some more room for error than sort of what the human polls are giving them, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if they were in that spot that the human polls had them, they would be in at risk for dropping further with those losses. But with the top 2 seed, you've got some room to fall to be still in the top 3 or top 4 seeding wise.
Going to be interesting to watch. Kentucky game Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Late tip-off. It should still be packed. I mean, it's got to be packed, right? It's got to be packed.
It'll be sold out. Yeah, I mean it's already sold out, but it'll be a big crowd.
It'll be interesting. All right, quick football stuff, especially recruiting. Calvin Anderson, the Rice graduate of offensive tackle, visited Auburn over the weekend. Came away impressed. No really.
But have you ever heard a recruit say, "Gosh, I was disappointed"? I mean, it was just really a disappointing visit. I didn't like it. I wish I didn't come.
They only say that when they're not going to a school and they've already committed to someone.
Yeah.
Which this guy obviously hasn't yet. Impressive young man, apparently. I mean, the guy can do a Rubik's Cube in like 20 seconds behind his back. I couldn't do one in 20 weeks. What about you?
No, but there's a trick to it, isn't there? Isn't there like a...
I don't know. That's how stupid I am. I don't even know if there's a trick. I guess I could Google it, but...
I think there is a trick, but...
Even if I knew how to do it, I wouldn't be able to do it.
Yeah.
But anyway, smart guy. He's going to land somewhere. As of 2-3 weeks ago, it looked like Auburn was 3rd in that list. Be interesting to watch. Obviously, he's the last man standing for Auburn in this recruiting class, and then if they can't land him, they might look the graduate transfer route, continue to look down that route.
Well, both years they've kind of came in with somebody random. It was T.J. Neal 2 years ago, and then Wilson Bell the previous year. So
true.
There's always somebody kind of that you never expect if they don't fill that spot. So
very true. But neither really contributed heavily, especially Wilson Bell.
Well, that's what they'd rather have this. I think if Calvin Anderson, they'd rather have him than having two cups.
Calvin's a guy that would contribute
to the backup option at offensive line. That's never good. So
right.
Yeah.
Softball team's also underway with its season. Started off the season perfect, of course. An interesting story about Tannen Snow and why she sat out last season for Auburn. That's up at auburnundercover.com right now. Battling epilepsy. Can't imagine have to battle that every day. She's kind of worked on it. Obviously seen a lot of doctors, and now she's on the field and had a pretty good weekend. That was shortened by the rain that was moving through Sunday. They canceled all the games Sunday, but Auburn started the season undefeated. I think their first 27 innings, maybe more, I can't remember, I'm sorry. They held their opponents scoreless. So the pitching is on point at this point early in the season, kind of the way you see it, want to see it. The offense took a while to ramp up, but boy, they exploded for a big game there. Could have scored 20 plus in one game, but softball continuing its way up the top 15, trying to move up further up in the ranks as they obviously go into the second weekend of the season. Baseball is about to be underway. Tanner Burns, the freshman out of Decatur High School, the pitcher, number 1 on the Baseball America top 50 freshman list. Not too surprising. He was number 38 overall in the Baseball America top 500. He wanted to come to Auburn and play a year instead of being going to the MLB draft and playing professional baseball, because he feels like Butch Thompson can help him with his pitching. Butch Thompson, of course, his background is as a pitching coach, did an incredible job at Mississippi State there. I covered him for a few years, did some amazing things there with the pitchers. Really the reason why that program was able to get turned around underneath John Cohen with Butch Thompson as the pitching coach. And so he's at Auburn. Actually fell to like the 37th round. But if he had informed teams, yes, I'm going pro, he probably would have been a second round selection. But instead, he's at Auburn. So baseball season gets underway here soon, next week. So this week. So is it this week? I'm mixing up my weeks.
This weekend, isn't it?
This weekend. We're going to be speaking to several, or at least a couple Auburn players here this week before the Kentucky game, actually, basketball. So interesting. A lot of SEC teams in the top 10 and top 15 this year. So difficult schedule ahead. Auburn opens the season this weekend against Longwood, 3-game series there, and then next week they do some midweek stuff against Georgia State, Troy. So keep an eye on that as the baseball season's already here. Softball already underway. All right, let's take some listener questions. I want to thank everybody for listening. Let's look what we got here as I scroll through Twitter. McLean asks, I don't know if this is John McLean, who's the biggest returning sleeper to have a big year on offense and defense? I hope they're not sleeping during the game. That could be dangerous.
This is for football?
Yes, football. Actually, it's hockey. I don't. Nate Craig Myers. I'm not giving up. And TD Moultrie, just because he's going to have to.
Is TD really a sleeper though? He played a good amount of time snaps. He played a good amount. Is easy for you to say.
A good amount.
Offensive sleeper. Gosh. Who's even on the team anymore?
You're already out of football mode.
Yeah. Well, they got to have a running back, right? Let's go with Asa Martin.
Okay.
And is there a defensive sleeper as well?
Yeah.
Nick Coe doesn't count. What about Jordan Peters? Does he count? Because he played real limited. Because he'll start.
He'll start probably. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, him.
Okay.
We'll
I like that. Auburn Rants ask, how loud will the jungle be Wednesday? I'm going to say 112, 115 decibels.
Loud.
It's going to be very loud. Drink Local Birmingham asks, baseball starts Friday. How do you see the Auburn Tigers doing in 2018? I mean, as I said, the SEC is going to be really tough this year, especially these road series Auburn has to play this season. I really don't know. There's a lot of moving parts. Philip Marshall will probably be able to answer that better on our message board. Of course, he covers baseball for us. And in fact, we're going to try and start doing here as the basketball season starts getting down to the crunch time for Auburn, some Auburn Roundtable podcasts where everybody on staff joins the podcast. So we'll look at that question again later down the road. Ryan Self asks, Hulk or Captain America? My 3-year-old son needs help on which he should prefer.
Which you should prefer?
Yeah, which of those heroes, Hulk or Captain America, should a 3-year-old kid?
Well, Captain America, but 3-year-old, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I don't know. Batman.
That's not the answer.
It's always the answer. Batman's always the answer.
Okay.
I watched Lego Batman the other night again. How many times have you seen that movie? Like 50? Or at least, how long has it been, at least in the background, where you've had to listen to it?
I mean, infinite. But I mean, I've seen all those kids' movies now.
Yeah.
A billion times. So.
I like to fight around. Man, this is a long question. I probably should read it before I say it out loud, but here we go. CD asks, with a backfield of 6 scholarship running backs, can this be the end of the tunnel for guys like Malik Miller and Devin Barrett? In my opinion, just not guys who are going to help in a drastic way on offense. Asa Martin and Harold Joyner will be the leading rushers by the end. Jertavius Whitlow will be interesting. I disagree with that, CD. I don't see Harold Joyner coming in immediately and contributing. Especially,
if the young guys contribute, somebody's going to lose playing time, and it could be you could lose one of those guys at the end of the season. But I don't know about those guys leading the rushing way.
Well,
but
I don't see Whitlow's more of a gadget guy and more of a person they would use in the running game on sweeps. He's not going to be your every down running back.
But my point is if Cam Martin's, say, your leading back, and then Asa Martin's your number 2, and Devin Barrett's your guy that you throw to, Malik Miller could be an odd man out and decide to transfer.
Sure, there might be. Yeah, it just
I'm just saying the way how everything shakes out, you could lose. But that's how it is everywhere, and that's how it is.
Yeah.
Have depth. So, but I don't know if that's, it'll be interesting to see how that competition shakes out. I think the coaching staff's interested to see how that competition shakes out.
Yeah. This spring will be very interesting for that, if they tackle.
Yeah.
Spring practice, by the way, starts March 1st. It was supposed to be February 27th, but they moved it to March 1st. Eric Bolin, who I believe still works for SEC Country, I don't know, asks, who was the best athlete in the Farmington High class of 2002? It wasn't me, but one of my buddies responded to that question just now with, if you're looking for a 28-foot game winner in pickup basketball, it's none other than Brandon Marcello. I agree with that. I had a lot of game winners in college. Not college basketball, but, pickup basketball.
Right. I got what you're
saying. Because, I look like an athlete. But it's back when I had hair. It's back when I was thinner, athletic, could run full court for about 3 hours a night. It was good times. Now I don't. But anyway, best athlete in class of 2002. I don't even remember at my school. If I recall, our 2002 athletic season wasn't very good. The girls' basketball team was winning state championships at the time, but everything men-related at our school was not very good. Who was the best athlete at your school?
I don't have any idea. I can't remember yesterday, let alone that far back.
Yeah. So, 16 years ago, when did you graduate high school?
2000.
2000.
Mm-hmm.
So, your 20-year anniversary is coming up in 2 years. That's crazy.
It is. It's old. Yeah, I'm old. Well, now that's a good place to end on. So am I just depressed and start?
I think they did like a 10-year anniversary at our school, and 3 people showed up, including the 2 people who organized it. So 1 person showed. I remember seeing a picture. Oh man, I don't know if I'd ever go back. I don't want people to see what I look like. I mean, people already. I mean, I don't know. No. Anyway, yeah. Anything else?
No, since the last time. No, because we did a late week podcast, so I haven't had time to see anything.
Yeah, me neither. So there you go. That'll do it for the Auburn Undercover podcast. Big basketball game Wednesday night, Auburn Arena, Auburn versus Kentucky. We'll be there with our Valentine's dates, which are our laptops.
That's true.
Hope you enjoy your Valentine's Day. Don't go too overboard. I know some guys want to go overboard, but don't do the bare minimum, but do just enough. Maybe do something like handwritten. Because that stuff, the wives and girlfriends like more. I'm not creative enough to think of anything, so.
I got nothing. I'm hoping to remember it exists still.
Valentine's Day?
Yeah.
Are you hoping Wednesday comes and goes and she's like, doesn't say anything?
I won't remember. I mean, if she didn't say anything and I didn't say anything, it probably wouldn't even come up.
Flowers are so stupid.
Waste of money.
It is, but I do it every year. It's like buying air. What are you going to do with it?
Yeah. Well, air you kind of need.
Well, you put air in a glass and you look at it. I don't know what the heck I'm saying.
Give that as a gift. It's hit that time of night. So
yeah, it has. All right, guys. Thanks for joining us. Make sure to go wehavedonuts.com, our sponsor. Delicious donuts. And make sure you go to auburnundercover.com for delicious coverage of Auburn athletics.